Hello, welcome. Now I'm sure you have heard some of the stories I have read on the Ananerbe Hour. Did they frighten you? Don't worry, those stories are just that. Stories, and nothing more. But what happens when the stuff of nightmare comes to you when you are awake? Come, join us, take a seat, around the campfire. So glad you can make it back for more tales. If you have a story that you wish to tell around the campfire, contact the Paranormies via email at paranormiespresent@gmail.com or on Twitter at the Paranormies. He don't practice Santeria. He ain't got no crystal ball. But what our friend Ami Goy has could be a manifestation of his own negative energies. Emi Goy sits down with Johnny to talk about an experience he had while his mother was away on vacation.
What's happening, everybody? This is Johnny, and I am here with Amigoy. He has a story for us. It's a very, very interesting story as it pertains to the show as well. So why don't you go ahead and take it away there, Amigoy?
Sure thing. So just to preface this story, I live with my mother, and she is a believer in what some would consider to be like Afro-Cuban paganism, that whole like voodoo shit.
Oh, so, like Santeria and stuff? Or
yeah, that she's into that stuff. So she actually has like a saint that she used to worship before this happened in the house, and she would like give tributes to it and like leave gifts for it and stuff like that. And I used to joke that like that's like you're gonna invite something into the house if you keep doing shit like this, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, so sure enough, my mom went on vacation during the Christmas break, and I was by myself in the house with the dog. And over the course of this break, I actually discovered the Paranormies podcast, and I really enjoyed the show, so I decided that I was going to marathon all the episodes that had been released up until that point.
That's the way you do it. You just get into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mainline it like heroin over a weekend. There you go.
Yeah. So I would listen to the show late at night, and another important part of the story is that so my mom has a really big memory foam bed, and I figured that she wasn't going to be in the house. I would just like sleep on that bed because it's like really comfy. And this is going to come back later, but so what would happen is at night during the break, I would like either be playing like a video game on a handheld or reading, and then I'd have like the show either playing in the background or I'd be actively listening to it. And then sometimes I would fall asleep while the show was playing. And then shortly after I started doing this, I started feeling like when you feel like you're being watched.
Mm-hmm. I definitely know that feeling.
Yeah, so that I started to notice that whenever I was there's a hallway in the upstairs on the second floor, and whenever I walked through that hallway, I'd start to feel that if I was in a room that had a door to that hallway and the door was open, I'd feel uncomfortable and like kind of just like close it to make myself feel better. When the lights were out, it's one of those things like when the lights are out, like you like run into your room, like just just to like get out of the dark and stuff like that.
Yeah, you get that. It's the heebie-jeebies. I mean, I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, I definitely know the feeling of my grandparents' house had their upstairs, the second or third upstairs bedroom was like that. We always I couldn't walk past it with the door open at night. I know that feeling.
Yeah, right. Now I'm willing to admit that it's possible that all the listening to the spooky podcast is what put the idea in my mind, and I was just psyching myself out. And that's what I would tell myself whenever I felt like this. But if you'll entertain my theory for a minute, I think that because we like you talk a lot about on the podcast about memeing things into reality, and like the more you believe in something, like you can like make it manifest.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
yeah, so I think that you guys, because you guys have a large audience of people who listen to the podcast, and they might not believe what you guys are talking about, but they're willing to entertain the idea enough to listen to it. And I think that belief is actually itself going to be creating, paranormal, like paranormal hotspots. If someone's sitting in a room listening to like hours of the show, and like they're believing everything you're saying, I think that that's gonna,
that would like facilitate some sort of a happening, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Because I know there was one episode where you guys were reading like Japanese curse stories, and like in one of them, it's like if you hear the story, then the curse is gonna happen to you. And it's one of those things that like if you believe something like that, like that's a really shitty thing to do, right? Like
Yeah, like the Candyman thing. If you look in the mirror and say his name 3 times, kind of a thing, or whatever, you're gonna bring it out.
Yeah, exactly. So one night, as I was nodding off to sleep, there was actually a really powerful windstorm in the area, and every time a gust of wind hit the house, it shook a little bit. So that in itself is a little bit scary. But every time the house got hit by this gust of wind, there'd be like I'd hear something downstairs, and I would tell myself that it's either my dog, because whenever there's a storm, he freaks out and he runs around, or maybe the gusts of wind was rattling the furniture downstairs. So that's what I kept telling myself, more to tell myself that everything is fine, nothing is wrong, and stuff like that. And so this went on for a couple of minutes. Wind would hit the house, something would be moving downstairs, and I'd just be like, whatever, no problem, nothing's going wrong. And then a really powerful gust of wind hit the house, and then I swear to God, it sounded like something was punching the backboard of the bed 3 times.
Wow.
And the second that happened, I just completely, like, I froze up. Like, I tensed up, I kind of like curled up, and I shut my eyes closed. And I was like, for the life of me, couldn't open my eyes because I was so terrified, because like I psyched myself out like that. And then what happened next really fucking freaked me out, because as I was all tensed up with my eyes closed because I had just gotten the shit scared out of me, I started hearing like someone screaming at me.
Whoa.
And yeah, so something was screaming at me, and it was angry. And in the background, I could hear voices also screaming. And the really fucked up thing was that I could hear the sound of like flames. And so it sounded like I was surrounded by flames, and I kept getting hotter and hotter, and I was sweating, and my body temperature kept rising. And this went on until I finally worked up the courage to open my eyes, and then everything just stopped immediately. So that's what happened to me. After that, I was so fucking freaked out. Like I started praying. Every time I caught myself,
I would have been praying to all of the gods. Like
yeah, like every time I caught myself. Yeah, every time I caught myself falling asleep, I'd wake myself up. I know that like there's like if you're laying on your back, it's more likely to have like sleep paralysis. So I was like doing everything I could to like not sleep on my back, and sometimes I'd catch myself rolling on my back, and I'd stop myself because I just didn't want that to happen again. And that happened, and the feeling of creepiness continued. And then my mom came back from vacation, and I told her what had happened. I told her, you invited something into the house. Like this is really fucked up. And then she was laughing it off, and she was saying like, oh no, that's my guardian angel, and he was just mad at you because you were sleeping in my bed or something like that. And like, I don't think guardian angels like throw someone in a pit of fire and like scream at them for like sleeping in someone's bed.
Doesn't sound very angelic at all. It sounds more that sounds more like a malevolent sort of a thing than an angelic. Yeah, I have a guardian angel. I know, because I've had a few times in my life where I should be dead, but somehow narrowly avoided it. And a few times my mom actually says she saw something.
Yeah,
like there's a car about to hit me, and and all of a sudden I'm not in the street anymore, like that kind of stuff. Guardian angels don't do mean stuff.
Yeah, well, she was, because like in her religion, like they call them saints, and like that they consider them to be guardians and stuff like that. And like like you talk to like the witch doctors, and they're just like, oh, they're not demons, they're just looking out for you. But here's the thing though. So a couple of weeks after this happened to me, I was in my room, and then I get a knock on the door, and it's my mom, and she's coming in asking if she can sleep in my room because she said a man attacked me while I was sleeping in the same bed.
Okay, so now this malevolent thing is attacking your mother.
Yeah. So like at first she was like, she didn't really believe me, and she said even if it is true, like it's like no, I'm not gonna stop worshiping these things because they're watching out for me. And then like whatever the fuck attacked me was now attacking her.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's like I'm trying to process this. That's okay. So your mother practices voodoo. Is that? I mean, is there a name? Is there a name for the religion that she uses, or is it like? I mean, is it Santeria? Is it?
I think it's Santeria.
Santeria. Okay, that's like the Haitian. I'm gonna get if I'm mistaken, I'm going to get yelled at, but I'm gonna call it Santeria. Okay, those are the people they do the chicken sacrifices and that kind of stuff, and the witch doctor throws the bones and sees the message in the bones and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, shit like that.
Okay.
Like my mom has a witch doctor too, so.
Okay. I know this is kind of an odd question, but your mom's white, right?
No, my mom is white, yeah.
Okay, which makes it even weirder because normally whites aren't really into this. That's intriguing in itself. But,
yeah, it's like this new age shit that like instead of like I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I like to say. I'm not honest, but you're interesting. But you know, but it's usually a chick like I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Yeah, whatever. But no, I get it. But like, so she's more new agey, but instead of being into like Wicca or into like you know, her chakras or whatever, she's into this witch doctor type stuff. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, because she has a best friend who is also into this shit, and like my grandfather was a banking executive, so she grew up in Latin America, like because like they would spend a couple of years while he was working at the Brazil branch, and then she spent a couple of years living in Panama, and like she made these friends, and then when she got Facebook, so she reconnected with her friends through Facebook, and then they put her in contact with this witch doctor, and then they all have like she goes down there, or sometimes they come up here and they have their fucking ceremonies and shit like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's see, the thing is like the people that practice this stuff in Haiti and wherever they practice it around the world, they believe in it thoroughly, and I've read enough on not enough, but I've read a good bit on this. And, you know, these things seem to be true. You know, they seem to actually affect changes and happenings and whatever. And that's not something that I mean, personally, I would not want to get into. It's kind of frightening to me to you know, the things. I mean, I've been in The Rainbow. It's an older horror movie where this guy goes down to Haiti and he gets buried alive because they do this thing to him where like his heart stops beating and blah, blah, blah. And I've seen some of the other movies about Santeria and whatever, and I've seen documentaries, and that's some scary shit. And it's literally witchcraft. And you know, when you're messing around with that kind of stuff, you know, we at the Paranormies don't believe in coincidences, and it's no coincidence that something happens. You know, so
yeah, exactly. So it's.
And I don't want to. Like I was gonna say I don't want to take responsibility for bringing it in since you were listening to the Paranormies. Like, listen, guys, if you're listening to this, just by listening to our show, you're not gonna possess your house. Just, you know.
I'm not saying that listening to your, like clearly, like if anyone's to blame for this shit, it's like probably like the person who invited the thing into my house, which was my mom. But like it probably didn't help that I'm listening to like podcasts about like pudge wuggies and all this other shit.
Oh, right,
like,
right. You could have helped. Well, no, what you did is you opened your mind to the fact that these things could be real, and coupled with whatever energies your mother had put into the house by doing her little rituals and whatever, you know, maybe your mom opened it, you know, cracked the door open, and you kind of allowed, you know, maybe, who knows? I don't know how any of this stuff really works. I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff, but yeah, it's really creepy. So what? So you said that there was a thing that was screaming at you, and you heard flames. Yeah, and what was the other thing?
I heard one loud voice that was yelling at me, like yelling at me in anger, and then I also heard
the sound male or
of like
female?
Flames. It was male,
okay.
And I also heard the sound of flames, and the flames would get closer, and as they got closer, like my body temperature was going up, and then inside the flames, I heard the voices of like people in pain.
Okay, so the male voice, was it yelling at you in English? I mean, could you understand what it was saying?
So
or was it just like incomprehensible screaming?
So it was mostly incomprehensible screaming, but here's the thing, because like sometimes on the Paranormies, you guys like to joke about the ovens and everyone's favorite tribe going into them, right? So
Yes.
This guy was yelling to me about ovens, about putting me in one.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. That wow. And the voices in the flames, were they like a bunch of different voices? You could hear male, female, kids,
Yeah,
adults.
yeah, a bunch of different voices, males and females, and they were just screaming out in agony, like they weren't saying anything comprehensible.
Okay. So they were in pain, and so they were probably in the ovens. And wow. And
Right.
this was the oven master coming for you. Interesting.
Yeah, so he was going to throw me in there. And again, it's possible that like I fell asleep as you guys were cracking one of these jokes, and like that put the idea in my head.
Are you sure?
So-
Are you sure you didn't fall asleep listening to like a Guy Fieri show? And- no, this isn't anything to make light of. That's really scary. And now you were asleep when this happened. When you could you wake up, or did you wake up, or like did you like?
So
did you,
well, that's
how
the
did
thing.
that-
I think it might have been sleep paralysis or something, because like I said, as soon as I think that it punched. It sounded like someone was punching the backboard of the bed, and as soon as that happened, I immediately, like, I was conscious, I was tensed up, and my eyes were forced closed, and I couldn't open my eyes. But everything happening around me, what I was hearing, felt real.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That does sound like a sleep paralysis story, or maybe some sort, not necessarily sleep paralysis, because you didn't feel anything holding you down or anything, right?
No, it was the shock of the impact on the backboard.
Okay.
It gave me a shock, and then like I wasn't able to exit that state where I was all tensed up and I couldn't move and everything.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that does sound like sleep paralysis then. Yeah, I've had dreams where I wasn't able to wake up, and then you wake up and like that, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Did you have that same sort of reaction when you finally woke up?
And I was, and like I said, because I felt my body temperature kept getting higher, so like I was completely drenched in sweat when I was able to woke up. Like I could barely breathe because like my chest was all tensed up and stuff like that.
Oh man, that is freaky. And you were the only one in the house. And how long were you alone for after that?
So I was alone for about 12 days. This happened about 6 days in. And then, so I was by myself for another 6 days.
Did you sleep in sleep in that bed after that again?
No, I did not.
I didn't think so. So since then, so your mom came home, and then she
Yep.
had a similar thing happen.
Yeah, she didn't go into as much detail as I did, but the only way she described it was like, first she said the man attacked me. And then when I asked her, what do you mean? And she was still kind of out of it. She said, like, what man attacked you? She said, Satan. Satan just attacked me in my bed. I want to sleep in your room tonight with the light on. And then later the next day when I asked her about it, she said that it was like a man who was completely pitch black, like was like throttling her while she was sleeping.
That's wow. And has she gone back to sleep? I mean, obviously it's August. She's gone back to sleeping in her room.
Yeah. So ever since that happened, she like, I guess because I put the idea in her head that like, maybe this might have been her fault. She doesn't really take this Santeria shit seriously. Like she doesn't give the thing offerings anymore. She doesn't, another thing is that she actually invited the witch doctor to come up and like perform like a cleansing ritual or something like that in the house.
Mm-hmm. Did he?
Yeah. So, well, that's the thing though, because it's one of those like I'm sure that there are people who actually believe in this, but like I'm willing to bet that specifically when like white people are getting involved in this, it might just be like bullshit and charlatans, because like this quote unquote witch doctor came into our house, drank all the liquor in our liquor cabinet, and then fucking left. Right?
Huh. Interesting. That sounds like a snake oil salesman to me, man.
Yeah. Right. Like.
Yeah. Well, it's along the lines. Okay, so he's got a white. Does your mom donate money or time or things to like?
No,
this?
I mean,
No?
I'm sure that I'm sure she paid this person for her services.
The witch doctor was a female or a male?
Yeah, it was a female. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, because I could see like a guy taking advantage of like single women or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I know
but
there's
no, like.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's because my mom's friend was coming up from Mexico, and like I guess she brought the witch doctor with her because like the friend who also believes in this shit was really concerned and wanted the witch doctor to like clear out her house. And then like the lady was up, like she didn't stay with us, but she was up in Canada for a couple of days, and like she got fucking drunk every night. That's all she did.
I'm just trying to. I don't know. Shit, I have no idea. I was gonna say something smart ass, but I had nothing. Yeah, that's a crazy story, man. And since then, nothing else. Since the witch doctor came and did the quote unquote cleansing, nothing else has happened. Your mom still sleeps in the same bed.
Yeah, so nothing else has happened then. For a while, it was one of those things that like I'd sleep with a light on, or like I'd make sure that what we started doing was that the doors that connected to that one specific hallway that I mentioned, we started closing all of them.
Okay. So
whatever was in the hallway wouldn't get into like the bathroom or any of the rooms and stuff like that.
Okay. That's something that excuse me, that's something that I would probably do too. Keep that fucking door shut.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially at nighttime. Man. And since then, nothing. Like, you can listen to the Paranormies in your room and whatever and know.
Well, actually, it's another funny thing because, like I said, I was listening to the Paranormies because it was the break and I was off work. So I was listening to it in one concentrated place. After the break was over, I now listen to the Paranormies during my commute to and from work. So I think, and then it stopped. So I think this also adds to my theory that, like, if you have it in a concentrated space, as opposed to like if you're like on the bus or something, it's where like you're already used to a lot of people traveling. It's gonna dissipate it or something like that. You know, like.
Yeah. Well. Shit. This is just more evidence that paranormal stuff happens to people we all know. So, you know what I mean?
No. Yeah. Like, and it's one of those things that like
Were you a believer before this happened, or were you just like?
I was. I believe.
Oh, okay.
Like one of the reasons, like one of the first episodes that I listened to you guys was like the episode you had on like aliens and Atlantis and stuff like that. And the reason I listened was because I already had an interest in that, and then like all the other stuff that, like I'm not gonna believe everything you guys talk about, but like stuff like the missing 411 and stuff, like there's actual evidence of. It's just like, okay, yes.
Well, we don't either. There, right? I mean, we don't believe everything we talk about either. It's like, you know, Henrik on Red Ice. He's had you know, people on the same topic coming from, or three different people on the same topic coming from three different positions. He couldn't possibly believe all three of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's the same thing with us. Like the stuff we talk about, we don't necessarily believe it. We're also not skeptical of everything. We're not like, you know, we're not going to counter signal everything that comes up either. Otherwise we would have a really boring show. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, again, I'm willing to admit that it might have been a psychological state that I had put myself, whether it was through listening to the show before sleeping or sleep deprivation or whatever. But like, what happened to me felt real.
You said sleep deprivation. Now, how long had you been awake?
So, because I wasn't in work, I would stay up like a couple hours later than it wasn't like I was going days without sleep. But it was like I was going to sleep later. Yeah. Okay,
because I used to have insomnia where I would be awake for like 5-6 days at a time, and like I would go into this weird fog, like dreamy, half awake, half asleep type. I don't want to say that the description in Fight Club was accurate, but it's not completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
But then when you finally do go to sleep, you sleep for like 2 days straight. But you also do the hallucinating and seeing stuff and hearing things and like all that kind of stuff. But okay, so if you're only staying up for like a couple extra hours, that's not technically sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like I'm sure that like either like a neurosurgeon or someone could come in and explain to me exactly what happened. Like, but to me, like I felt like someone was throwing me in a fucking oven. You know, so. I
don't think a neurosurgeon could, honestly. I think that neurosurgeons are more could tell you about the mechanics of your brain, but I don't think that that neurosurgeons can tell you exactly what's going on. I still have a hard time, you know, like when you close your eyes and you go to sleep, right? It's dark. You sleep in the dark, right? When you have a dream, when you have a dream, you see it and it's vivid colors and light, right? Where does that light come from? You know, is there like a projection screen? Is that your pineal gland projecting on the inside of your brain? I don't know. You know?
Or maybe the inside of your eyelids or something like.
Or something, yeah. You know. But yeah, it's you definitely see things in your head while you're sleeping, and they're, you know, sometimes they're black and white, sometimes they're vivid color, sometimes they're a combination. It's just, how did that happen? You know?
Right, but like the thing, like again, I wasn't like the shock of the sound woke me up, and then, or at least from my perspective, everything I experienced was actually happening. Like I wasn't in a dream at that point anymore, right? So
Right. That is crazy stuff, man. It's very, very, very crazy stuff. Yeah, you have anything you want to add in here at the end of this story, or any conclusions
related to the story? No, not really. No.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on there, Amigoy. Thanks for sharing your story with us. That is a very creepy, freaky story, and I'm glad you actually got your mom kind of away from that, because that's not a very white type religion.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, if anything, it's the exact opposite. But yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. You got anything you want to tell?
Thanks
the
for
fans?
having me.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Yeah, the fans, just got to let you guys know that if you don't lift, you're not alt-right. So join the Lift Wafa today, and that's it.
Right on. Yeah, I agree. Get out there and lift. All right. Well, thanks for coming on again. And for the rightstuff.biz, this is Around the Campfire. Talk to you later.
In the second segment, Scott sits down with Outlander to discuss some various ghost encounters he experienced as a child, and then get into their own personal beliefs about what these ghosts are and the differences between them.
Hello everyone, and in this segment I am here with Outlander. Is that what you want me to call you? I assume.
Yeah, that's my moniker, yeah.
Right. I've listened to a couple episodes of your show, Late Night Alt-Right. I thought it was pretty good. You had John.
Oh, thank you.
The Paranormies, of course, and then you had the Internet Aristocrat as well, which I thought was a pretty impressive get. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. Internet Aristocrat, my co-host Alec Majerison got him on, and it was a very good, very interesting discussion with the guy. He's sort of an apocalyptic guy. At one point in our conversation, he talks about how he thinks that there's really no hope but a collapse. So that was a kind of an interesting take, because usually in our circles we're a bit more optimistic these days with the way the alt-right is heading.
Yeah, I think I'm a lot more optimistic than I was a couple years ago, and I don't think we should rely on a collapse either, but you know, I can also see where people are coming from when they think that we're heading for one. You know, who knows? But you messaged us on the Twitter. You said you had some interesting stories, and I read what you had written, and I thought they were pretty interesting. You said you had some experiences first off when you were younger, before the kind of the main experience. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So when I was a child, I lived just outside of Toronto. It was in, I believe it was in like Mississauga, that area. It's just it's within the Toronto subdivision. And I was a little kid, so I'm not sure how credible these stories are. I remember them through my eyes, but also when I was older, about 11, 12, 13, I told my parents the stories, and in two of the instances in both of these stories, my mother was also involved, and so she told me her perspective, and so I'm going to kind of give a little bit of both. I'll tell what I remember firsthand, and then I'll tell what she told me after many years later when I told her the story.
Yeah, sounds good.
So basically, we moved into this house. This is the first house I have memories of. Apparently, when I was like a toddler or a little younger, when I was 1, we lived in an apartment building, and then we moved to this house, and we were there for not very long. I'd say about 3 years. It was a newly built house, and I was very young. I was probably about 4 years old, and when I was a child at the time, I had a little sister, and she was about a year younger than me. And we used to kind of play this weird game where if you're sitting, we'd sit on different ends of the table, and one of us would look down and the other one would look up, and you'd try and catch each other, looking up and down. Just a stupid little game we'd play at the table. So one day I remember it was in the morning, it was breakfast time, and I was sitting at the table. My mother was making breakfast over in the table in the kitchen, wasn't in the dining room, so I could see her off making something. And I just remember sitting there, and I see this head kind of pop up, like somebody is just underneath the table, and he's kind of peeking above the table at me. And it's a boy. He had like I would say long blonde hair, right? As an adult now, it wasn't long, not something you'd think of like as someone from the 1700s, but it was more of a shorter haircut, but longer, right? And he kind of looked up at me and he smiled, and then he ducked down under the table. So I looked under the table playfully, and I didn't see anybody. And I remember I asked my mom who he was, and she told me that it was a neighbor's kid and that he had to go.
Okay.
So her version of the event was that when she looked over while she was making breakfast, she saw the whole child sitting there, and when he ducked under the table, he completely disappeared.
Wow.
And I mentioned when I talked to her, I said, "Hey, who was that?" Right, when I was a child, and she was surprised that I saw him, and she's like, "You saw him?" And she's like, "What did his hair color look like?" And at that age, I never knew the word blonde, so I said yellow. And so she was pretty shocked we saw the same ghost.
Wow.
Nothing happened really other than that with that particular ghost. That was more of a friendly apparition. Any commentary?
Was that the only ghost that you had an experience with in that house?
Oh no.
Okay.
That was one of the two stories. Yeah, the second story, a little bit creepier. I was in my room late at night. It was about bedtime. This was probably some months after or before. It wasn't close to this event. And I was in bed, and I was incredibly scared. I believe there was a monster under my bed. So I was annoying my parents, yelling that I think there's a monster under my bed. So my mom came into my room to check under the bed and prove to me that everything was okay. And have you ever seen when a door is open and there's like that little crack in the hinge? Like my bed was sort of across from the door being open.
Right, I know what you mean.
If that makes any sense.
Where the hinge is, there's that little tiny slit, and you can kind of see through it.
Yeah. So I remember looking into that slit, and it was just completely black, and it was sort of moving. It wasn't like moving like in a smoky way, like it wasn't like smoke or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I can tell that something was behind that door, and it was like shifting a bit, right? Like it was completely black.
So you weren't just seeing like a shadow, then it was something actually moving.
Yeah. It was pitch black. Like it wasn't like a light black that you get with a shadow or anything like that. It was like as black as if you had I'm trying to think of something like a record or something like that. It was very dark, very black, like indistinguishably black. And I remember being scared, and that's kind of where the memory ends for me. But my mother's version of the events, when I told her years later about this, was that when she looked up after checking under the bed, not seeing anything, she saw me staring at the door. And so she went and looked behind the door, and she saw what she described as a black wildebeest with glowing red eyes behind the door.
Wow.
She
how
said
big was it?
She never said. She said it was like, I guess from my memory as a kid, like she never said how big it was. And I haven't talked to her in a long time, but from my memory as a kid, it would have been probably maybe not the whole door, like the whole hinge of the door from the bottom to the top,
Mm-hmm.
but it was maybe about 4/5 the way up there. From what I remember of the blackness behind the door.
So
it would have been
at least man-sized.
Yeah, at least man size, maybe like around that size. And then she kicked it, and it dissipated. And so that was pretty much it. I just remember, though, growing up years later, many years later, even to this day, actually, but not as much. Years later, I always had a fear of that little crack behind the door hinge.
Yeah,
whenever I would get that,
so.
yeah, like whenever I'd get that uneasy feeling, even if it's just like a scary story or something, I would always kind of look over, and it would still kind of freak me out. eventually I ended up sleeping. When I got to my teen years, I ended up sleeping with the door closed. And
Yeah,
so
that
I
might
never
just
really
be
had to
best.
worry about it. But
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say we didn't live in that house for very much longer, and I never had a ghost experience since then. But it still kind of freaks me out, and with that door hinge thing. And as I said, like my mom was involved with all these stories, and we collaborated on it, years later. So you could say, well, it's, maybe she was influencing you or whatnot, but I don't know any horror movies or any stories where there was, a blackness moving behind the little crack in the door. And because that still freaks me out to this day. Not as much because I'm grown and I haven't had ghost experiences or whatnot since, but subconsciously that kind of things that make you nervous, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Was it like standing on its back legs, or because you said it was a wildebeest, and they
Yeah.
four-legged animals?
Well, I'm not sure because like I didn't see it firsthand, and my mom just
Right.
gave this description of its face.
Gotcha.
Uh,
I didn't know
that
if
would
she had
kind of
described
like,
like kind of how it was postured or anything like that.
yeah, I haven't talked to her in a long time about it or anything like that, but it certainly is kind of freaky. And my mom was big into ghosts and stuff. She was sort of one of those new age spiritualists.
Mm-hmm.
And she would always be talking about, oh, I talk to ghosts all the time, and you don't have to worry about evil spirits. You can just ask them to go. So, but it's not. Sometimes it's not as simple as that. If you know any haunting stories or
Oh, definitely. There was a
places
guy we talked to on one of these, and he's been followed for like years and years, and he can't make them go away. So yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just asking them sometimes to leave you alone.
yeah. So I mean, I think like when growing up and stuff like that, who knows? My mom could have accidentally channeled something into that house for a brief period of time, and then for whatever reason it went away. Because I tried years later looking up ghost stories. I actually found that specific house we used to live in, because the address I originally thought it was is actually the street name, and it was right up the middle of the street. So I looked up on Google Maps years later, and I found the exact house, and I kind of sort of did a search in Canada for any sort of ghost experiences or paranormal activity in regards to that house, and I found nothing. So
Well, I mean, it's possible. Like sometimes these things aren't necessarily tied to a location. Sometimes they can be tied to people or rituals or something like that. So maybe if your mom was into the new age stuff, maybe somehow they were attracted to her or the house, or who knows. I think the most interesting part of that is how you had the independent verification. I don't think your mom was like influencing you or anything like that, because no kid's going to just imagine playing hide and go seek or looking under the table with something that isn't there, and then make it up, and then have their parent verify the same thing. Like it just doesn't happen. So it's really interesting. You had some other experiences too, though, didn't you? It didn't just stop there.
no, those are as far as it goes for ghost stories. Another thing I just wanted to touch on though with ghosts and all of that, I just like my own thoughts about it, was I think that there is a certain difference between ghosts and maybe demons. And when it comes to like the first one in the story, like the little kid at the table, that could be a ghost. That could be something that it's just a harmless spirit. But that second one, I mean, if you ever seen like a picture of what a wildebeest looks like, it sort of has that like it almost looks like a Satan, or that picture of the goat, with the hand up and everything like that.
Yeah, the Baphomet. Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of has that image. So I kind of wonder, like, what are the connections between ghosts and demons, and if they're one and the same sometimes, or if they're completely different and they use the same portals to enter our world. I have no idea. Do you have any idea about that? Or
I mean, it's kind of just my personal opinion, I guess, but I don't think ghosts and demons are the same thing at all. Like, for example, everyone knows ghosts or spirits that passed on. I don't think demons have that sort of origin. Like, I don't think you die and you get turned into a demon, even if you're incredibly evil or whatever. But as far as demons go, I think it's just collections of really negative energy or just negativity. I don't know.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
do you think, like, what's the difference between like an evil ghost and a demon, really? And like, what's your thoughts? Like, what makes a ghost remain evil and on Earth versus one that's say benevolent or even neutral?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, any answer I give is just going to be me pulling it out of my ass, basically. But
yeah. Well, hey, we all don't know for sure what
right,
this is all about.
That's true. It's just as valid as anyone else's guess, I suppose. I don't know. I think a lot of times, like, benevolent ghosts, usually benevolent ghosts, I think, move on. So I don't think they're quite as common necessarily as malevolent ghosts. And I think there's probably a difference between malevolent ghosts and demons as well, because, just because you die, it doesn't mean you suddenly stop being an asshole. Like, if you're an asshole in life, you're probably also an asshole as a ghost. But I also don't think that if you're like a ghost who's an asshole, I don't think that's going to manifest as a wildebeest with glowing red eyes. Like, I don't think anyone's spirit looks like that. Especially, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, do you think that maybe they could take certain forms to scare people or to project their image in a way?
I don't know, because it seems to me that most ghosts look like the people who they were in life. Like, if you go to a haunted house and you see some ghost and you describe, like, oh, it was a man in his 50s with a mustache, and then whoever owns the house is like, oh, that's Tom, and then you go back and you look at people who died, and lo and behold, there's someone who looks like that. I think that that's probably more common than someone shape-shifting into a wildebeest after death. But then again, I don't know. Then again, maybe some people have that ability. If they're just enough of an asshole, they can spontaneously turn into some sort of demon wildebeest. I don't know. I just think
maybe if they're go on.
I was just gonna say, I just think the main difference probably between a ghost and a demon is that one has a human origin and one has some sort of otherworldly origin. I don't think that demons were once people who lived and died.
Oh, fair enough. What about a skinwalker that dies and has a ghost? Maybe he can transform into animals.
Good question.
There's afterlife.
Well, I don't know.
Some esoteric paranormies.
Do skinwalkers have souls? I mean, I know, according to like Native American folklore, the way that you'd become a skinwalker is to basically commit some sort of like heinous act that like there's no coming back from, like either murder or incest, or incest and murder, something like that. It's almost like a ritualistic kind of thing where they have to kind of shed their humanity in a way. If we have like any Native American listeners, which I doubt we do, I'm sure they're going to be pissed at me for misconstruing that somehow. But I don't know. It seems to me almost like skinwalkers kind of gave up their soul in a way. So if they die, I don't know. Do they have something that leaves their body when they die? I don't know. That's a good question. I think that if someone had the ability to turn their spirit into a wildebeest or something, it would have to be probably some sort of practitioner of magic or something in life. Like, I don't think a normie ghost can do that. Like, maybe some sort of like alpha Chad, witch doctor ghost.
Well, and I kind of am curious.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, we got a really funny picture on the Twitter today. It was that new meme that's going around. It's like the Virgin whatever, and then the Chad.
Yeah. I think I saw this one.
It was like a Virgin haunting, and then a Chad apparition or some shit like that.
Yeah, and the
retweeted it.
Chad
It
one's
was-
still got its muscles, right?
Yeah, it's like it looks like the Chad character, but he's like got a sheet on. He's still got his muscles and everything. I retweeted it, so if you go on the Twitter, you can find it. But yeah, I don't know.
I have one more. I have
Oh,
one
yeah,
more
yeah.
question about it. Like to move on from the malevolent ghost to the benevolent ghost. One of the most. I listened to your podcast. I guess this would be last week, and there was in the Amityville horror one. There was mention of a what's it called, like a female spirit who would hug the wife, like Mrs. Lutz.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sort of curious as to some of these stories. There's always like ghost stories. You have your benevolent ghosts almost living in the same situation as a malevolent ghost, right? Or a malevolent apparition and a benevolent apparition.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Like how do these beings actually exist within the same confines without actually how would I say this? Without actually
Like
interacting with each other. Like you never see a ghost battle or anything like that, right? Usually some people will meet the good ghosts, some people will meet the bad ghosts, and they're sometimes intermingled into the same house.
You say that in your question you asked about them never interacting with each other, but I mean I can't name any cases off the top of my head, but I know there's been situations where psychics and mediums and all of them, they'll like pick up on multiple ghosts being in the house, and a lot of times what it'll be is there'll be kind of like one like alpha ghost, who's like an asshole, and he
Chad
does all
ghost.
the Chad ghost, and then there's a bunch of like virgin ghosts, and basically the Chad ghost is the one who's doing all the malicious haunting, and then the virgin ghosts are kind of just like there for the ride basically. And the Chad ghost will like bully the other ghosts. I know I'm using silly terminology, but I mean it's basically what happens is
This is good. Simplifies it.
right. You'll have one ghost kind of bullies the other ones, and a lot of times with these psychics they'll just try to get rid of that ghost and then leave the other ones alone because for whatever reason the other ones don't want to move on or whatever, but they're also not hurting anybody. So I don't know if the reason that maybe I don't know if maybe it's because the Chad ghost doesn't let the other ghost interact with people when he's around or something like that, and that's why you only get one at a time interacting with people. But I think that like psychics and people like that who may be more sensitive to it, they can kind of pick up on multiple ghosts in a way that your average person who's in a haunted house isn't able to. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a good question. I never really thought about that before.
And
I don't know.
do you want to finish your thought on it? Or?
My finishing thought was I have no idea.
Oh, okay. I also wanted to say, like, I mean, you're right. I guess there is, coming off the top of my head, I remember stories of them interacting, but not like in other stories, right? Other people's stories. And I remember that there is the occasional story where two virgin ghosts will interact with each other, but you don't really hear, like, you'll sometimes have ghosts that they'll have died in the same situation or in similar circumstances, and they sort of like in these hauntings they'll have those people who read, what did they bring? I've seen a few of the more modern ones, the ones they'll bring like these devices that can hear the ghosts talk or something like that.
Yeah, like the EVP stuff.
Yeah, those things. And some of the ghosts will seem to speak to one another when they have something like in common, or like they'll maybe have been both soldiers in the same regiment, or they might be a mother and a daughter, or they might be something like that, but they seemingly won't interact with negative ghosts or even the other ghosts. You might have these two ghosts are in the main hall, and then down the hall there was like a ghost who's was a former nurse or something on base, and you don't see ever, I don't know, they don't seem to interact. It's kind of strange. It's almost like they're restricted to certain places at once.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It does seem like, for whatever reason, if you die with someone, like, you're more likely to be able to interact with them. I think the world's oldest haunting and I might have the details wrong, but I seem to remember there is a Roman legion that supposedly haunts someplace in, I think it's Great Britain. I'm going off the top of my head. I'm not. I might be wrong, but it's a whole legion, like, of Roman soldiers, and they'll be seen like marching in formation and stuff. You get the same thing with, I think, a lot of the Civil War battlefields where you'll have the soldiers who all, they all died together, and they'll still interact with each other that way. But for whatever reason, like you said, there's a mother and daughter who talk, and then a nurse who doesn't interact with them. I almost wonder if they can even be aware of each other. When you die, do you get like stuck in time somehow? Like someone dies, and they're stuck in that point in time, and then someone else dies, and they're in a different point in time, and it's like two completely different planes of existence.
Yeah, like it's like they can sometimes interact with people, but then they don't seem to interact with each other unless, as you said, like unless there's this overwhelming negative Chad ghost that's suppressing them or something like that.
Yeah.
They otherwise seem oblivious to each other, to like other same level ghosts, I guess.
Well, there was another case.
But they recognize both the...
Yeah, they recognize each other, but they don't recognize any sort of third-party ghost. There was another case I remember of, I think it was some firefighters who all died at the same time in like a burning building or some shit like that. And I think they all came back, but they all had the same near-death experience. Like they all went up together out of body, and then they all came back together because they were all revived. So I don't know. It seems like if you die with a bunch of other people for whatever reason, you kind of group up with them in the afterlife. I wonder, just as a thought I had, how they would have, like old Egyptian pharaohs and stuff would kill all of their servants when they died to keep them company in the afterlife. So I wonder if there's almost something to that. Like, the pharaoh died, and then all his servants they actually do have to serve him in the afterlife because they were sacrificed with him or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, they might sort of have been aware of that phenomenon. There's a lot of things about the ancient world that seems that like we really don't know about. Like we know of the ancient world, but there's some things that they seem to know more about in regards to the afterlife or the spiritual realm. And maybe they knew that. Maybe they're cognizant of that.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's not just like the Egyptians or whoever. Like there were all sorts of cultures did that, killing the servants to have, I think that the Vikings would do it as well. They'd have like a burning ship, and they'd have some like girls go in there to die with the chieftain or whoever. Yeah. So it's something that seems to pop up repeatedly. So maybe, I don't know, maybe people kind of realized that, what we just talked about, and came to the same conclusion. Who knows? Was there anything else you wanted to ask about that, or do you want to talk about your other experiences that you had?
Yeah, we can move on. We got a good discussion about ghosts there. I mean, is there anything else you want to ask about the ghosts before we move on, or?
Not particularly. I mean, it just not randomly, but it like instantly disappeared when you saw it. The little boy, he just popped under the table, and just like a light switch, he just disappeared.
Yeah, it was almost like when you look, it's almost like if you saw someone sitting at a table, right? Mm-hmm. And then they go under the table, say they drop something, and then you look under the table and there's no one there. Right? And then you look up and they're not there. It seemingly just wasn't there, disappeared.
I have to imagine it's very disorienting to witness. What was, I'm sorry if you said this already, I didn't hear, but was he wearing anything unusual that would have made it seem like he didn't, belong in that time?
I don't remember what, he may have been wearing a shirt, but I don't remember what the shirt was. It was only really up to the neck I saw, okay. And the head was kind of tilted. The only thing I can remember is that the hair was unusually long, and not like long as in like an 1800s, or sorry, not 1800s, 1700s, 18th century man. It would almost look like like I would describe it similar to the haircut of somebody from the 90s, like the mushroom cut, but it could have been a longer cut, like something you would have seen kids from the 60s or 70s would have had, like this sort of,
like a Beatles mop top kind of thing.
yeah, it could have been something like that. Like it was not something that you would have seen in a history book. It would have been more of a modern hairstyle.
Right. But I mean,
So,
there wasn't anything about him that was like unusual looking or anything like it just looked like a boy.
yeah, it looked like a boy with blonde hair who was, maybe a little bit older than me, like not like maybe like 6, 7, something like that when I was 4. So it wasn't much of a difference. It's hard to place. Like, and the house was built brand new too. That was the part that my mom said was really weird, is that the whole area was built brand new when this happened, and so you have no idea what part like could have happened on that land, right? It could have been something on the land. It could have been something related to my mom and what she was doing. So I have no idea what it was, but
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I mean, it's hard to pin down. I don't know. It makes you wonder, like, what draws certain spirits around. And I don't think it's necessarily like the same thing every time either. Like, I think sometimes it's the land or the house, and sometimes it's people. So yeah, it's hard to say. Now with the wildebeest demon, you said your mom like kicked it and it disappeared, right?
yeah, that's what she told me.
So was it like a solid thing that she kicked and then disappeared, or was it like, did your foot move through it as she kicked it? Or, I mean, I'm sure I didn't ask her at the time.
The impression I got by the way her saying she kicked it was more like she kicked its form. So like not that it was actually like physically there, like it was like corporal. It was. I guess you would assume that it kind of like went through, right? Like it would be ethereal in a way, but then it just sort of disappeared when she did it. So I guess when she made contact with it.
Man, that's so weird. Did she get any like really scary vibes off this thing, or did you get any? I mean, obviously you were a kid and you're scared of monsters, but did it feel like evil or malicious in any way?
Yeah. Like I was very scared at the time. I mean, I think the reason why I thought there was a monster under the bed was because I had that overwhelming sensation that there was something really wrong, right? At the time. And my mom said it was scary when she saw it with the glowing red eyes, because she said to me, anything that has glowing red eyes isn't a good being. So that's why
Yeah, I've never heard of like a being of love and light with like glowing red eyes.
And all black, right? You never see a nice being like that. No, there was that overwhelming sense of dread and being afraid. And I think if I was maybe an adult, it would have been worse. It was scary. It was scary enough to leave like a mental imprint about that space within the door hinge. But I think it would have been a lot worse if I was an adult, or if I was even a teenager and I saw this thing, than when I was a kid. Because when you're a kid, you see, like my first reaction when I felt that was to ask for my parents to check for monsters under the bed. Like I didn't understand that what I was experiencing was so out of the norm, right? Because kids always have stories of the boogeyman or something. There's monsters here, or there's don't go into the woods because something will get you. Like these sort of things that kids intuitively think, okay, this creepy stuff is probably part and parcel with what it's like to live in life. So I felt very afraid at the time. But if I was an adult and I experienced it, that would have been a whole different level of. This would be a very different retelling of the story.
Right. Yeah. Kids don't know any better. I mean, you're right. Like, kids don't know they should be as scared as they should be, and I almost wonder if that's part of the reasoning behind. Because they're always like, oh, well, children are sensitive to ghosts and pets are sensitive to ghosts and all this stuff. And I almost wonder if it's because as adults, we maybe subconsciously notice these type of things, but think, it's not there, or, you're just too scared to want to believe it. Kids have a lot more open minds. And I don't mean that in like a hippie way, but they don't have the filters that we do.
I think what it is like my mom used to always say that when it comes to spirits, it's like you have to have a sort of belief, and when you do have that belief, you kind of have to want to see them. I think most adults, either they don't have the belief, and when they do have the belief, like they don't want to experience ghosts. Like I myself, I believe in them. I don't want to experience them, and I haven't. So other than what I just said, that story, when I got older, I certainly never wanted to see any more ghosts again. But the weird thing is also is that with kids and ghosts, like I was still sleeping in the same bedroom until I moved out. So it's not like I changed bedrooms. It's not like my parents said, oh no, you're not sleeping in that room anymore. You're going to sleep in our room, or you're going to sleep in your sister's room and bunk bedded or something like that. It was still very much like, okay, well the ghost is gone now, I can go to sleep, kind of thing. And as an adult, you wouldn't even conceive that, because you know something just appeared in your room. Who knows when it'll appear again, right? And
yeah, I'm gonna stay in a hotel for a month. Like, are you kidding me? There's no way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why in these stories, whenever you hear, like, there was that one guy who came on really early in your show who's talking about he bought that house, and you know, there was that thing, that black figure. Don't want to spoil the episode. People should go back and listen to it. It's a really good one. There's that black thing that his son described as a Doritos bag in the kitchen.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, and all of these ones with kids, it's like really the kids are the ones probably experiencing the most activity. They just don't talk about it because they don't think they don't think of it as unusual, right? They think of it as just, oh, you know, the ghost is here now, I got to get rid of him, or I should leave and he'll be gone soon, or whatnot. They don't actually, they're afraid, and I can tell you from firsthand, they're afraid, but they just think once it goes away, it's gone for now, it's okay. But, you know, and it'll come back, but then it'll go away again. That's sort of the attitude. Whereas, you know, an adult, you're like, I want to be able to feel safe in my own home. I want to feel safe to do this, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a kid, you're kind of always a little weary. You're always calling for your mom or your dad when you need help. You feel like you got that support. Whereas an adult, you're kind of like, this shouldn't be here in the first place. This doesn't make any sense. And so the kids' stories are usually always the weirdest when you hear of a family moving into a house or something, and there's, you know, a kid or both kids or all kids experiencing paranormal activity. And it's always like, you know, what was the Amityville horror, Jody, is that it, like the pig thing, the angel or whatnot? Yeah, like you hear about that, and it's like, oh, this kid was actually like interacting with a ghost on a frequent basis. Kid's in his room playing with his toys, and something appears and starts talking to it. Mm-hmm. And as an adult, that would freak you out. Even now, it's giving me a little goosebumps just talking about it. But as
that pig thing, dude, that scared the absolute dog shit out of me. Like, I got goosebumps talking about it right now. Out of everything in the Amityville house, the pig thing just absolutely something about pigs, dude. Like, I don't know. Like,
ghosts. I don't know. Like, wildebeests are like ghosts. That's what I think. Like all of these sort of weird animals that keep cropping up in rituals. Pigs are one of them for sure.
Yeah.
But also goats and lambs and things like that. I don't know what it is, but yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. So it's like kids will just interact with these ghosts, and you know, you'll find out. You'll find out maybe days later or something that your kid's been talking to a creepy ghost in the room. And you'll open up like, man, you'll say to your son, like, do you think there's something wrong with this house? Like, is there anything weird that you feel going on? You know, meanwhile, you've had like a window open and closed and you kind of creeped out by that. And the kid's like, oh yeah, I talked to a ghost. His name's Jody. It looks like a pig. It tells me to do bad stuff or something. And it's like,
right.
You're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I don't know. It is kind of funny how kids just accept that stuff, but I mean, at the same time, you know, if you're 6 years old, like everything you've ever experienced in your life, like your memory goes back when you're 6 to like 2 years, you know, like, so everything's still new, and you know, you're a lot more accepting of experiences. Like, you can tell a 6-year-old, hey, we're going to, I don't know, Disney World, and they just accept it. Like, they've never been to Disney World before, but, you know, oh, a new thing's happening to me. Like, okay. Or, you know, you start kindergarten. Oh, okay, this is a new thing. Like, kids are very malleable in what they'll, you know, accept as, like, a new experience because, you know, like, they don't know any better. So if a ghost happens to talk to you and say to, you know, kill your family, oh, okay, this is a thing, I guess. Like, you know, you don't have, and as a kid, you don't have anything to measure against.
And it's also not like a weird thing too. If a ghost came up and said to kill kid to kill his family, because it's not one of those weird situations where this is going to be a good horror story. I imagine a kid's interaction with that would be like, yeah, this ghost is really weird telling me to kill everybody. Like, I don't know what its problem is. Like, that would be the reaction to a kid to the ghost, whereas an
Right.
adult would start panicking immediately and thinking, he's going through schizophrenia. The kid's just like, yeah, it's this weird ghost that's just telling me to do bad stuff. Yeah, like, can you believe it?
This guy's rude.
This ghost tells me to go in and hit the dog. Like, I don't do it because I love the dog, but I don't know why this ghost is telling me. I don't know. Anyways, sort of yeah, the kids with ghosts. Those are the creepier stories usually.
Yeah. Now, your other experiences, you said that you've never actually seen another ghost per se, but you've had some other experiences as well when you were older. Do you want to talk about those a little bit? Yeah.
So these ones aren't about ghosts. This was in a new house. This was many years later. I was probably around 12 to 13. We were far, far away. We're still in the Greater Toronto area at the time. But it would probably be this house is probably a good 3 or 4 hours from where the other house would be by driving. It may be about 3 hours. And I was on the way on the other side of the Greater Toronto area. And it was another brand new house. My parents were upper middle class, so they always had brand new houses being built, selling the old one. And I was in this bedroom. It was a smaller bedroom. And I remember one time I was laying in bed, and when suddenly I was awoke by a noise, and it seemed like slamming, like almost if I was opening and closing a drawer, right?
Right.
And it was sort of like alternating. Like, it wasn't just all in unison. It felt like many doors were opening and closing, right? But it was sort of in a sequence in some ways. So I opened my eyes slightly, because you've ever like kind of woken up, you're still kind of groggy and your eyes are kind of open, like what's going on, like what woke me up? Like, it was not a startling wake up. It was kind of just, because it wasn't just like a big slam or whatever. It was just opening, closing in a sequence, right? So it's kind of like, I felt like as if somebody was doing something kind of thing, right? It was very ordered in the sense. It was sort of like 1, 2, 3 kind of pattern, but anyways, getting too detailed. I woke up suddenly to that, and I kind of looked over, and I had an alarm clock sitting on my dresser, and I see the alarm clock shaking to this rhythm of the opening and closing of the doors. And I look over, and in the darkness, I can see this dresser had 6 dresser drawers, and they were opening and closing, right? Not slowly, but like very quickly. And they were in a pattern, and it was in a consistent manner. So some would be closed and others would be open, then it would close and open kind of like that. And then I fully opened my eyes because I was like, wait, what's going on? And then they all just closed and everything stopped moving. It was quiet. And that was sort of how it kind of ended. I looked around. Nothing happened. There was nothing in the room. And then I just went back to sleep. Like, I went and kind of didn't necessarily, that time I didn't necessarily roll over. I kind of looked around, and then nothing happened. So I kind of, took me a bit, but I eventually just fell back asleep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were still kind of a kid. So, going back to the whole kids being accepting of things, like there's no way.
Well,
I would have fallen back asleep after that. Like, what did you think? Like, oh, I guess it's just over and done with, so I don't have to worry about it now? Or
I think, like, when I first woke up from it, I wasn't, like, when I first woke up from it, I probably wasn't sure at the time that it was sort of caught me off guard when it happened, right?
Right.
And it sort of, I wasn't sure what was going on, and then when it happened and then it just stopped, I kind of expected something else to happen, right? When something like that's going on, you expect, okay, am I going to see something? Because I had my previous childhood experiences with the ghost. So is there something here? I looked around. Is there anything going on? And by this time, I still haven't closed my door, so my door was open into my room. So I was there was enough light coming through from the moonlight and whatever, and I was kind of like looking around, and there was nothing around in the room, and I waited for a bit, waited, saw nothing, didn't feel scared or anything, no overwhelming fear one way or the other, just that it was a very unusual experience, and then I just went to sleep after. Because it's sort of, it's different from those stories where you had that sort of fear experience, like this is kind of unstartling, this creeps me out. It was more like something just happened, and it just stopped. You didn't have that dread lingering in the air or anything like that.
Was there kind of a fear or dread thing when it was actually going on?
No, it was sort of went on for like when it woke me up. The course of from me being woken up to it stopping was probably over the course of like 5 seconds. So it almost it was just more shocking that it was happening to begin with, because I first was looking, sort of still being groggy. I looked over at the clock and I'm seeing it shake, and I'm like, "What the heck's going on?" That's sort of the attitude I had, and then I woke up and I kind of opened my eyes up wide. I'm like, whoa, and then it stopped. It all just closed. It stopped.
Now, was it 5 seconds from when you saw the drawers moving to when they stopped, or was it 5 seconds from when you actually like woke up to when it stopped?
When I actually kind of woke up, so it was very quick. I just sort of saw that it was happening. I saw the alarm clock shaking first, and I looked and I saw the doors opening, and then I kind of jolted up and awake, and then they all closed, and then stopped.
So it didn't stick around for you to watch it or anything like that.
Just enough to get a glimpse of what was actually happening. And I remember this is another one of those stories where you could say, well, maybe there was some lucid dreaming, but I'll swear that to this day that it actually happened, because I remember actually seeing it with my eyes open. It wasn't like a dream sequence. It wasn't, the clock was shaking. I could hear it. It wasn't something like I've had, moments where I've been like lucidly dreaming to some extent, not seeing anything, of course, but that's sort of, you'll hear a sudden, like a sudden noise or something as you're drifting off to sleep, and that kind of like startles you a bit. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, I've had those before where you're falling asleep and you hear like a bang or something, and it just kind of makes you jump. But I mean, those are usually like one-off events. Like I've had maybe a dozen of those in my life, and not like in the same week or anything. And also the thing about those is it's not tied to like your surroundings. It's just a noise that your brain hallucinates.
Yeah.
But to have the video, not the video, but the audio and the visual at the same time like that, I mean that's pretty interesting, I think. Especially for you to see like your alarm clock moving. Like I would think if it were something that your brain made up, I don't think that you would see other parts of your environment reacting to it as well.
Yeah, like what would your brain be able to perceive that if the drawers on the dresser were opening and closing, it would like not only show it, make a sound, but also know to move the alarm clock in accordance with all of that.
Right, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know, that's really strange. The other one that you had was kind of the same way, where you had some like furniture moving, right?
Yeah, that one. So it was later in the year. I had 3 stories where this occurred, but I only remember the 2 of them. There was something that happened earlier, but I've lost it to memory. But the dresser one was the second one, and this was the third sort of final instance. And it was also sort of odd. I was asleep in my bed, and the way my room was structured is that the bed was sort of up against the far wall. So you know how you have the door going into the room, and then there's the far wall at the back of the room.
Yeah,
so my bed was right there, and it was I guess it was on like a straight line. It wasn't on any angle or anything like that. It was on just straight up against the wall. And one night I went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night to find that my bed actually moved. It was now diagonally in the middle of the room, and now above my head, sort of in the corner of the room, I would say. So as you walk into the room, you go to the right, and there's that corner. The bed head was now underneath these shelves that were above the corner of my room, and the dresser was to the right. It was to my left. So the bed would have turned on a almost like a 90-degree angle. And it'd be 90. No, it'd be like a little bit less than 90, but it's 45 on a diagonal.
And it was 45, yeah.
Yeah, so it was on the dresser was just to my left now instead of on the other side of the room, and my bed was very big. The room was very small, and then the bed itself was on the feet of the bed was now on the other corner of the room, so away from the door. Anyways, I remember I woke up and I sort of hit the dresser with my arm, and I was surprised, and I looked over, and my bed moved, and I looked looked up and I saw the shelves above my head, and I just fell back asleep. I was so tired. When I woke up finally, like when I went to wake up in the morning, the bed was actually back where it was originally. And I went down to tell my parents about what happened. And my father said, my mom with her ghosts and everything, she's like, oh, it could have happened. It could have happened. And whether she's, what would you say, entertaining me, whether she was entertaining me or my idea, or whether she sincerely agreed with me, I don't know. But my father was much more skeptical, and he said, no, I don't think it happened. So I went upstairs to find some sort of evidence as to how this, if I could find out to prove that the bed moved in any way. And when I went into my room, one of the bed's very heavy. There was an imprint on the carpet of one of the bedposts, right on
the new spot that it had moved to while you were sleeping.
In the middle of the night, yeah.
Huh.
And the room was very small, so there wasn't any place for the bed to be moved to normally. Like my mom liked to move all the furniture around every 6 months in the house, but there was only really one spot this bed could be. It could either it really could just go up against that wall. It was a very big bed. It was, I think, like a queen or a king bed, and the room was incredibly tiny. So there wasn't a real practical place to put it in there with the other furniture. And so I saw that there was this imprint in the carpet of where one of the bedposts was, and I showed my dad it, and he didn't believe me. Still, he said, "Well, maybe it was from an older bed move, but the bed hadn't been moved in some time. It was still in the same spot it was where when I first experienced the dresser and everything like that. So it hadn't changed from where it was originally positioned. So it couldn't have been an older bed move. It wouldn't. My parents never, my mom never moved the bed on a diagonal. Never.
Right. Yeah. That's strange.
And so I've always chalked those up to. I've always thought of, like, I actually believe in psychic powers. Not to say one has, like, I have psychic powers, like I can make people levitate, or I can find where dead bodies are, nothing like that. But I think, when people go through puberty, their brain goes through all these changes, and it may be that we have the ability to do things like telekinesis, but we're just not either at that stage in evolution, or we're not in that stage of the mind's not trained to do it. And so, maybe through puberty, some of these things are sort of, they go wonky, and it happens, and then it just sort of goes away as you reach adulthood.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Not just with telekinesis either, but a lot of hauntings and a lot of poltergeist activity will also correlate with someone in the house who's about that age, 12, 13 years old. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but it seems like there's kind of a correlation between the two. So maybe it does come from the human brain, undergoing all these hormonal changes and stuff. I don't know. That's still interesting either way that, if the bed was never moved into that spot, how did it get there? There's, there's really only one way that can happen as far as I can tell. Either that or your parents played some sort of prank on you that you didn't wake up from, which I find to be a little bit unlikely.
Yeah, it's sort of a really weird one, because there was physical evidence. Like I showed my dad, my sister was there. My sister bought it, of course, because it was in a spot where the bed would never have normally been in. Again, the room was very tiny. I wish I could give you the dimensions offhand, but it was a very small room. I had the smallest bedroom in the house. It was unusually small, and the bed was very big. It would have been, if it was on that diagonal, if we ever did move it onto that diagonal, the room, there would basically, my head would have been next to the dresser. There would have been no room for the dresser. There would have been I would have been right under the shelves. Even if it was in the other order where my head wasn't on the shelves, the bed, the feet of the bed would have been under the shelves, which no one would arrange furniture in that way.
Right.
So it was just a very bizarre it was a bizarre spot, and I'm glad I found it, because I was able to prove, hey, look, this is where the bed moved. And at least it gave me a little bit of credibility. Otherwise, I probably would have forgot about the story entirely.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me. Not anything like that, but it's very disorienting to wake up and not know, like, what position you're facing.
Mhm.
Like I've done it before where I've just been so like dead tired that I'll fall asleep on the couch, and then I'll wake up and like I'm not in my bed obviously, and it takes like a couple seconds to kind of orient yourself because it's like, what's going on here. And I've had that happen, and then I've immediately fallen back asleep, so I can understand why waking up and your shelves being there, like you don't really think anything of it until later when you actually wake up. Oh, that's really
Yeah.
strange though.
And also, you never, like, if this was, going with my theory, if this was any sort of psychic activity, you would probably mentally be pretty tired when this stuff happens, right? Like, you
Yeah,
wouldn't.
that's a great point. I didn't even think of that. I mean, I have to imagine it's probably pretty exhausting. So maybe that explains your willingness to fall back asleep after strange things happen. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
if it happened to
Who
me
knows?
today, I'd be way too freaked out to, ever fall back asleep.
Yeah.
But
It would certainly, you'd at least jump out of bed
Yeah.
and be like, what the hell?
yeah. I mean, but it's like we talked about earlier. Sometimes kids just accept it. I guess I don't know.
I did want to say one last thing about it is that I for sure know it wasn't a poltergeist activity because usually with poltergeist activities, you can sort of sense, don't people usually sense that there's something going on and there's things fly across the room or there's some sort
Yeah.
of,
And the other thing about poltergeists is they don't usually go away on their own. Like you got to make them leave.
yeah.
So for you to have these 2 or 3 experiences and then just like that's it and it's over and done with, it doesn't really sound like a poltergeist to me because you can have some space in between experiences, but they always ramp up and they always stick around unless you make them leave. So yeah, no, I don't think it would be a poltergeist thing. Yeah, maybe some sort of telekinesis thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be possible.
Especially considering like when you're in that transition between being awake and being like in deep REM sleep.
Hmm.
What is that, like alpha waves? I think when you're in between awake and asleep. I don't know.
Yeah,
Whatever the brain
I
waves
don't
are.
remember the waves. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the brain waves are. That state is like what's associated with meditation. It's what's associated with like astral projection, things like that. So I think if the brain is capable of doing weird stuff, it's probably in that alpha state or whatever state it is. I assume is alpha state, but
Yeah.
so yeah, I
I think it's
don't know. I think it kind of all the pieces would kind of fit for like what you said. It's probably some sort of telekinetic type of thing that just kind of you accidentally stumble onto, and then it never happens again.
Yeah, and I think it's not, again, like, not to make it sound like, oh, I've got psychic powers. I think it's something that honestly could happen to anyone under, similar circumstances, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
once the
definitely.
conditions are just right, then your brain is able to manifest things that it normally wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it can probably happen to just about anyone. But like you said, the circumstances are probably rare enough that it probably only happens to X amount of people.
X amount of times,
Yeah, yeah,
not even a lot, probably like 2 or 3.
yeah. I don't know. Well, still, it's pretty weird. Yeah, thanks for coming on, though. I really appreciate it. Before we get,
Yeah, no
did
problem.
you have anything else you wanted to talk about or anything?
No, not here. That was pretty much it. It was a pleasure being on with you. Got to talk about ghosts, Chad ghosts, some of my ghost stories, psychic stories, what have you. It was fun. It's always fun to talk about these things, especially even to hear them. I always like hearing other people's stories as well. So when this episode comes out, I'll definitely give it a listen. I want to hear what these other people have to say and what kind of experiences they've had.
We're trying to. Well, we're recording on the 31st of July right now. We're trying to get the first one out probably by this weekend, hopefully. So like
Okay.
we got a busy week. We're recording 3 shows this week, and we're going to release our usual one on Friday, and probably try to get it out on Saturday. We've got the ones recorded, like the segments recorded, and Bradshaw is doing like the introductions between, and doing some audio stuff with it. So hopefully the first one will be out soon, and then this one will probably be out on the second one that we're doing. So yeah, it'll be pretty interesting.
Give me something to listen to on my way to work.
Right. You want to plug your stuff real quick?
Yeah, so me and my co-host Alex Jerson, we do a podcast. It's on SoundCloud. We're going to try and get something up on YouTube. You can find the link from our Twitter accounts. Mine is at TheOutlander14 on Twitter. You can follow me. My co-host, his name is Alec Majerison. I think his is just at Alec_Majerison, might be at Alec Majerison. If you go on mine, you can find him, add him, follow him. We do our podcast as Late Night Alt-Right. You can find that on SoundCloud. We primarily do interviews. We've had Johnny on. We've had Mr. Medicare or Internet Aristocrat. We've had Avelian. Our goal is to really kind of build a community within the alt-right, whether they be people who are sort of on the periphery, whether they be people in TRS, Daily Stormer, people who, might not be affiliated with any of those groups, what have you. And we're just trying to bring people together, talk, have fun, do interviews. So we'd appreciate a good list of followers, have people listen, share with their friends. So, if you're looking for some good content with some people that you want to listen to, please follow us. And eventually we're going to have hangouts with all of our guests on, or quite a few number of guests. So we're going to try to bring some people together, and it only will happen really as if we get a lot of people who are interested in the show, and because the more people we have following us is the more inclined people will want to come on the show. Right. So maybe Sam Hyde wouldn't want to come on the show with 40 followers, but maybe if we've got 100 or 200, maybe he'll think it's worth it. So please give us a follow.
It's also very listenable. I've listened to a few of your episodes, and it's one of those shows you can put on in the background and kind of listen to as you go about and do your stuff. It's pretty good. I like it. So check them out. And yeah, thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.